Well, we are at that time of the month. Again, a new character, a 5-star at that, is on the horizon, along with its 4-star support. Well, not every patch you see a 4-star character designed solely for the purpose or the benefaction of said 5-star. But the question is asked nonetheless, is this character worth it? Now, let's try to just take a step back and reduce the noise. What I mean by that is reduce and filter out the most commonly said phrases, excuses to some degree of people just trying to write off a conversation, nip it in the bud, right? Saying, wow, no need to even have this conversation because there's no end game. It's quite lazy, in my opinion, to just say that. You'll see people copy and pasting this pretty much anywhere. And if that were truly the case, right, the game probably should have already tanked far beyond what was salvageable. And if endgame was that important, likely the game would have actually just ended with the release of that article. But nonetheless, it's going on strong, and it really just paints a picture that the people who are still screaming are the ones who are left on the port, whether they were dropped off or they got off the ship willingly. And as the ship sails off into the horizon, they're just giving it their best shot, screaming from the port at the top of their lungs, and what we hear is nothing but a faint echo of their honest opinions. But let's bring this topic back on track. Well, with Scaramouche coming, is he going to be worth it for beginners? Is he going to be worth it for veterans? Now remember, we're not thinking about this being like, well, the game has no end game, anyone can beat the game, so just play whoever you want. Because it's really not that simple. If you lined up all the characters in Genshin Impact and was forced to give them some sort of value, scaling, whatever metric criteria, there is going to be a somewhat obvious hierarchy of strong, weak characters. There are information we can use to define this, and what I really want to do is pin Scaramouche somewhere amongst this hierarchy relative to other characters. It doesn't matter what the content is, it's relative to the other characters that we currently have. And by doing so, I hope to be able to get a better understanding for exactly what it is Hoyoverse is trying to promote here, right? So from the very beginning, I think it's without a doubt that Scaramouche is going to be a damage-oriented character, and some would even go as far as to say that he falls within the hyper carry category. Now, what defines a character to be a hyper carry? Personally, I think a hyper carry is a character that hogs field time. It demands field time, and in exchange, it will yield you more damage than the typical carry would, right? So for example, Hu Tao is quite field dependent. She does almost nothing when she's off field. Same with Zhao, same with Ito, same with Sino. These are hyper carry characters. At least they're designed to be hyper carries, right? So character like Ayato, like Ganyu, like Tignari are your regular carries. Meaning they can carry, but oftentimes their role is not to hog field time and yield extreme damage output given a short period of time, but rather meant to play through some sort of reactions, synergizing with your teams through maybe quick swap teams that can get you a similar result through the collective efforts of damage output. So when I say Scaramouche is likely going to be a hyper carry, I mean that he is going to be a character that demands field time, but also can back that up with output. One character that everybody is going to be comparing Scaramouche to is going to be Zhao, and I already said it in my previous video, I don't think Zhao is going to be able to keep up with Scaramouche in many departments. The only one that I think will be comparable will be their damage ceilings, at least at a lower constellation. It's because Hoyoverse can't simply put a hard cap on the ceiling for damage, but when it comes to utility, comfort of use, ease of use, and synergies, I don't think a character so much newer such as Scaramouche is going to be as limited as a character that was released over a year ago at this point in Zhao. So then you would say, well, that paints a good picture for Scaramouche, right? It would bode well for players to maybe pick up Scaramouche. Well, hold your horses, not too fast, because we have to talk about the single biggest issue I believe in Genshin's design philosophy, and that is the heavy priority that has been put on DPS. Now this is due to the only endgame content being Spiral Abyss being DPS-centric. There is no metric, or at least very little, close to none, that measures success outside of the form of raw DPS. The faster you can clear the chambers, the better your result is going to be. And if you want that coveted 36-star clear, you got to beat the time limit. So meaning you have to kill the monsters as fast as humanly possible. There's no other way around it. Now, a lot of people would then pause again, like, well, so hyper carries are the go-to, the ones that you look to achieve this feat. And you would be half right, because in order for hyper carry teams to truly achieve this feat, you would have to pair them with a second team that is somewhat competent. And hyper carry teams are also known to be pretty expensive to build. Now, with Scaramouche being a hyper carry team, especially being released with Faruzan and a Nemo dedicated support, I don't know how deep you guys want to run this banner for, how many constellations you want for Faruzan. And honestly, if you get Faruzan to a C0 and you just don't build her any more than that, is it even worthwhile to have her in your team as opposed to some other 4 stars that you likely have already built up? Which begs the question, at what point does a hyper carry unit have enough resources to justify its role in the game, right? A lot of people would say, well, a C0 Ito with a free-to-play weapon with C0 Goro is strong enough to 36-star every single Spiral Abyss, no problem, alongside maybe a second team that can pull their own weight. Although I don't doubt that, I do feel like a character like Scaramouche being a Nemo has somewhat of an advantage over a character like Ito because of Geo's lack of reactions. Likely Hoyoverse had to overtune Ito's numbers a bit to get him to do enough raw damage to compete with the other reaction based element. But for Scaramouche, especially looking at his kit where it was revealed to us that having other elements on your team and swirling those elements can give you at most, at the same time, I believe it was 2 additional buffs to his kit. So it will be important to synergize Scaramouche somewhat with other elemental typings. So it's a very interesting play on how to utilize Swirl outside of a Viridescent-centric comp. Utilizing this, most people likely would only bring one other Anemo character with Scaramouche, and likely that is going to be Faruzan. So if you don't build up your Faruzan properly, you are gonna have to replace her with another character, likely a support DPS, which I'll be honest, probably isn't going to be fully well integrated with Scaramouche's kit and design. But there's just plenty of characters that you can choose from, meaning that at the end of the day, Faruzan likely isn't going to be very important, especially for low spenders and free-to-play players. But you can't deny the fact that without Faruzan on your team, your ceiling for damage output is going to drop. Then ultimately the question would be, is a C0 free-to-play Scaramouche with his kit design going to rival and compete with a C0 Ito, let's say, without Goro, but it's also free to play with a semi-functioning team, because both of these characters will likely fall in the same category as hyper carry on-field DPS units. Now here is my verdict. I do think Scaramouche is going to be fun, he's going to be quirky, he's going to have unique mechanics, but at the end of the day, a DPS will always just be a DPS. Now remember when I said earlier that there's a hierarchy of characters, essentially a tier list that all characters can be statistically slotted into. I don't think Scaramouche is going to be anything spectacular. DPS units are just not worth as much as some of the other roles in the game. There's an abundance of them and you have too many to choose from. They're usually also held back by some weird limitations. Some will be ICDs, some will be scaling, some will be a lack of powerful reactions, and some will be due to just poor design choices. How many of these issues will cripple Scaramouche as a DPS unit? We will have to see, but rest assured, one, if not more, will always affect your favorite carries, with exceptions to like 1 or 2, and that's why they're the best in the game. Support DPSs, or also known as off-field carries, as well as straight up support characters in this game are much better because they're so unique for the most part that it's difficult for Hoyoverse to really tone them back. As long as you're creative and willing to invest, oftentimes support off-field carries will be able to shine regardless of the weird limitations Hoyoverse tries to impose upon them. So pull Scaramouche at your own risk. He is likely going to be a better version of Zhao, but still going to be severely limited by Hoyoverse's stingy game design. With that said, let me know down in the comments below, are you going to be pulling for Scaramouche or are you going to be waiting for a future character, and why, right? Do these issues not affect future characters somehow, or is it the character itself? until next time, urge you all to stay safe and peace.